Good morning, everybody. My name is Trenton Ty, and welcome to Purgatory Ironworks. You got potatoes? Well, if you got potatoes, you're going to need yourself a potato masher, and today we're going to make one of those very things. In the Sorber collection, which is a cool book that has a bunch of colonial ironwork in it, they have a blacksmith's forge potato masher of a very unusual design. Now, of course, in my time, when I've seen a potato masher in the store, it's usually a piece of wire that's curly or screwy, but this particular one was made from 4 half-inch square bars. And these were spread out, and they actually had a little bit of texture on the end, and they were put on a handle. So today, we're going to see if we can't replicate that. Now, one of the things that I have learned as I'm doing a lot of this colonial ironwork, if you see an exceptionally smooth split between two pieces of steel, it's usually not a chisel cut. It's usually a forge weld where pieces have been put together. When originally researching this project, I was like, man, that is such a nice cut. However, it finally dawned on me that nope, there is no chisel fine enough to make that type of cut. Had to be a forge weld, and then it dawned on me that 4 pieces were fused together, and then they actually made themselves a tang to go in through the wooden handle. It's very cool to look at this old ironwork and figure out the process in which it was made. Just awesome stuff. Now, this should be a relatively simple project. It's going to have a heavy forge weld. I have 4 bars of half-inch square that have been tack welded on one end. Again, you guys know my preference when I'm doing these particular shows. I make it easy on myself so I don't screw up so much. And a tack weld can help you hold everything into place until you can get a good forge weld on it. So what we're going to do is we have got to fuse about 1 inch of this piece together here. That's got to be pulled out into the tang that will go into our handle. And then these guys were given a special treatment. They were actually chiseled and cross-hatched and opened up a little bit to give themselves a lot of potato mashing power and area. So we're going to chuck it up in the tongs, get it fluxed, and get a good forge weld on it. Now guys, there are going to be a couple challenges with this piece. Understand that these are half-inch thick bars, so that means that this entire bar is 1 inch thick, and that's going to require a lot of heat. The second challenge is the fact this is a very short piece. Now, if I were super cheating, I would have welded myself a bar on this other end, but that's going to mess up these pieces down here that we're going to have for later. So I'm having to use tongs. So the trick is I've got to have this super high heat, but without a proper handle and just tongs, and that's going to be a little tricky. All right, we've got a good heat. And there's our first initial weld. And one of the great things, again, about working heavier steel is it absolutely holds the heat longer. So you'll find that it's usually, outside of just getting it hot, it's a lot easier to forge weld this stuff because it retains the heat and you have more time to work it. All right, we got a heat with a little hiss. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. So now we should have an excellent fusion. Looking good. So now what's got to happen is we've actually got to make ourselves a tang. And this is going to be a great spot to actually use a spring swage because I want to nip in close right here and I want a good sharp shoulder. So I'll take this back up to heat and we're going to use our spring swage. Now, from a professional's point of view, every time I touch 1 inch, every thought of mine is going to the power hammer. 1 inch is a tremendous amount of metal to use. In fact, anything over a half-inch thickness is a lot of metal to move. So in the shop, when I'm actually doing production work, I'm trying to think about how to do that work most effectively and with the least wear on my body. And any other time, straight to the power hammer. Now, I am absolutely making an attempt to work this at a welding heat, especially because I'm moving so much material and so much metal. Ooh, that's hot, folks. Poke her in right there. Now it looks like my spring swage got off a tad bit. I'll try to correct. Get in there, you joker. Well, that's usually what I call butchering a spring swage, but we're getting a little bit closer. I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna take another heat, I'm gonna draw this out a little bit, and I'm gonna see if I can't work on that shoulder just a tad bit more, because that's ugly. Now, where did I screw up in that clip? So what happened, if you notice, from a previous demonstration, that spring swage was set too tight. What should have happened is it should have been open and a little bit closer to the dimension of the steel that I was using. In fact, you want it to be about a quarter less. So if it's an inch tall, you want it set to about 3/4. You want enough gap in there that it's easy to get it in, but then enough pressure to hold it into place. So my tool wasn't ready, and guess what? I didn't have my gloves. I'd have been set on fire. Now, I'm thinking what I'm going to do is I'll come back in a moment and address that shoulder issue. Truth of the matter is, it's not going to affect the performance of our potato masher, and it is something that can be cleaned up on the grinder or the file. So I am not terribly worried about it. But let me tell you, that's a heap of metal to pull out right there. I'm going to keep working on it. Now, this is where I have to confess something. In these latest videos that we've been doing, these videos have been done in one take. There's no reshoots. What you're seeing happening is what's happening in the shop. And I have always debated over the years about presenting a more polished professional video on that end where you only see the awesome stuff. And one of the tricks about doing this work, though, is if anybody's ever done blacksmithing, very rarely do you ever feel like a polished professional. Even myself has been doing this for 20 years. So it is important for me that you see that this stuff is hard, even for a professional. And many of these things that you're seeing me do here, I've done for the first time. I've never done these particular applications in this particular way. So if you ever screw up, if ever something goes janky, don't sweat it. Everybody's screwing up. It all falls apart, but if you stay on it, you can come out with a really cool blacksmith item. Now guys, one technique you want to pay attention. We know right now we're going to have a lot more material than what we're going to need. So to keep you from working all that material to death, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right here, and I'm actually going to go ahead and cut half of this off. I know I'm not going to need it, and so I'm just not going to waste all that hammer energy trying to pull out something that I don't need and have to cut off anyway. Now, when you're getting up around this shoulder, man, this is a place where a set hammer comes in super handy. Having an apprentice there to set a square hammer really will make a beautiful clean shoulder, and it's a lot more effective because the moment you sneeze and hit something you're not supposed to, if you're like me, you're going to have a coronary. All right, I'm going to take one more heat, and then I'm going to go to the grinder, or actually the hand file. The hand file is what I'm going to go to, the traditional method, and clean this up and get ready for when she goes into the stick mount. All right, one last heat here. Going to thin her down. All right. Got something that's not looking too terrible. I'm actually going to go to the file, clean up that shoulder, and then we're going to look at finishing our tips, and then we're going to mount her. And folks, I'd like you to take a look at this beautiful 100% traditional hand filing job. Beautiful, completely traditional. No grinders used whatsoever. No 36 grit power grinders with 4 horsepower motors. Nope, completely by hand. But you guys can see we have cleaned this up. We now do have a good tang, and we've got some reasonably clean shoulders. And from the pictures I have looked at, this looks like that they had ground the shoulders as well, but we're looking good there. Now what's going to happen is we're going to come here. In the original, these guys are actually opened up, but they have actually mushroomed these a little bit, and they have also chiseled and cross-hatched these surfaces. So that's what we're going to do right now. So guys, for this job, I'm breaking out my super tippy tap hammer. When you're doing doing that light chiseling or that light mushrooming, you need a much smaller hammer. And this little guy we made actually for some of our woodworking, but boy, this has been one of the handiest things for doing that fine, delicate work. So if you haven't made yourselves one of these, please do. Now the good news is none of this work needs to be done at super high heat, but what we're going to do first here is we're going to push our arms diagonally away. Give me a little bit more tightness there. Now the original did not have a tremendous amount of spread on it. It was just kind of opened up, and that's what we're going to try to replicate here. But this is 1/2 inch bar, so it does take a little bit to get her to move. And I think that's going well. Now, we'll let this same heat to replicate the original. I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a little bit of mushrooming. I'm going to take a little bit more heat. That's getting a little too much to move. So let's take one more heat and we'll come back to it. Okay, folks, we have an excellent heat. So I'm going to tighten that in. And now let's do a little bit of mushrooming. Again, it was relatively light on the original, so we're not going to go crazy with it. But now we're going to come in with our chisel and we're going to add the cross hatching that I saw in the original. Now, I gotta tell you, I think that the cross hatching was far more for decoration than it was for any type of usefulness. I mean, if you're smashing the potato, you're smashing the potato. And let me pop that out so you guys can take a look at it. You guys can see how cool that looks. So what I want to do is I'm going to take another couple of heats. I'm going to finish this bad boy up. We're going to mount it, and I'm going to show off our potato masher. Time for a montage. So guys, here is our piece. You can see we have our nice chisel indentations. We have a good shoulder here. Now I may have gotten a little aggressive with this piece here, so I'm actually not going to burn it in. I had drilled a pilot 3/16. So I think we're just going to tippy tap it in, but you can see we've had our ferrule. But pretty easily, you can see here's our potato masher. I made this out of a piece of hickory. We're going to pop this in here and very simply just hammer her down. And is it straight? Nope, don't care. So there is our potato masher. How cool is that? Let's get a close-up of it there. Can I tippy tap her a little bit? Can I bend her just a tad bit? Ah, there she goes. Check that out. Isn't that super cool? Make sure she's still in there pretty firmly. She is. Man, my own potato masher. I never knew I needed one. All right, man, I feel like a mashing fool now. What a cool, unique piece from the colonial era. A lot of the items that in our kitchen we take for granted that are all made out of plastic from Walmart, yet these things lasted hundreds of years. So I'm more tickled with this than I have any right to be. I mean, this is just super cool. And yes, this is absolutely going into the house, and we're going to do a potato mashing demonstration with it. This is just such a cool piece. Awesome. Well, folks, again, thank you so much for being here. Now, if you enjoy these videos are made possible, flat out and period. If it were not for my Patreons, these videos would not be filmed. If you'd like to see some behind the scenes work, some cool live streams, please go over to Patreon/Purgatory Ironworks and help support the channel. Outside of that, folks, thank you so much for being here. Stay cool out there, and I'll see you next time.